Hello, and welcome along to another Friday lunchtime stream. So, as I mentioned on Monday, my plan today is to effectively continue with this little saga that I've been doing of trying to get some Cake-Contrib add-ins updated to use the latest version of Cake. So, the one that I'm working on just now is Cake.SemVer. So, the reason I've picked that one is because if we go and have a look at the audit report, it's effectively next on my list. So let's have a look. Let's bring it up. So here's the audit. Here's the latest audit report that was generated earlier this morning. So if we look at, we filter this down a little bit. So the ones I'm interested in just now are mainly the ones that are known to be using Cake.Recipe, which is what I control, which is one of the projects that I'm kind of the main maintainer on, and I'm interested in the ones that are using Cake.Recipe, but they're not currently pinned to the current version or the current released version. And then if I change this to be ordered by the newest version of Cake downwards. So Cake.Unity3D, I've already got an open pull request to make the change on that repository. So I'm waiting on the maintainer of that to pull it in, which hopefully they will. APIG is a new one that's just been moved into the Cake-Contrib Organisation on GitHub, so I'm holding off on that one to speak to the maintainer to see if they want me to send in a PR or whether they're happy for me to do it directly. These two are being worked on by the maintainer of those, so I don't need to do anything with those ones just yet. So literally the next one on the list is Cake.SemVer. So Redith is Jonathan Dick, and I've spoken with him in the past about kind of updating things on his behalf, because he's got a lot of add-ins and he's also very busy. So he's happy for me to work on those. So when I went and checked last night, I looked at Cake.SemVer last night, I took a quick look at it, and it already had an open pull request to update it to use the latest version of Cake. So if we look at the code base now, where we're at, so if we look at this, and we look at the source file and then the project folder, which is project file, which is here, then we'll see that it's already referencing 33, which is the one that we wanted to. So that part's already been done, but there are other things that need to be done in terms of pinning to the latest version of Cake.Recipe, make sure it's working, that sort of thing. So my intention today is to walk through that and get this project updated to use Cake.Recipe. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is, as per some of the other ones that I've done, is I'm going to change the name. That's a lie. I'm not going to do that first. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull down the latest Cake bootstrappers, because I'm fairly sure that they're not up to date in this repository. So if I pull down the latest PowerShell bootstrapper, I'm going to do the same thing again for the POSIX version, and I'm going to change this name here just now to be setup.cake, because that's what it currently is. And then if we look at the changes, then yeah, there's quite a few changes in that PowerShell script, and this one's a brand new one. So the issue that I created for tracking this work is 15. So I'm going to go ahead and commit that with this. And I'm going to say update to latest Cake bootstrappers. Bootstrappers. Go ahead and commit that. And then the change I'm going to make is I'm going to switch away from it being called setup.cake. So the new kind of guidance is to call it a recipe.cake file. So I'm going to go ahead and change that to be recipe.cake, and I'm going to change this one to be recipe.cake as well. And the other one was actually called build.cake. So I never changed that. I thought I did, but let's call this setup. No, this is going to be called recipe.cake. So now we should have multiple places where we've got recipe.cake. We've got it in the app.ver configuration file. We have it in the two bootstrappers. So the one place that we don't have it yet is in here. So if I rename that to be recipe.cake, then I want to pin to the most recent version of cake.recipe. So I'm going to bring up for reference one of these projects that I've updated in the past. So I've kind of got a reminder of everything that I did. So on this one, we update the latest bootstrappers, and then we switch to recipe.cake. So I've got a kind of a git commit message that kind of explains why that was done. So I'm just going to reuse that here. I'm going to copy that as well. And it's 15 that we're working on. So let's put that in. And then what I want to do is I want to pin to the latest version of cake.recipe, which is what this line here is doing. So if I grab that and put this in here and then delete the existing one, that will pin it there. But this will actually fail at the minute. Now the reason it's going to fail is because currently the version of Cake isn't pinned in this repository, and I know that because there's not a tools folder with a packages.config file in it. So if I go over here and attempt to run the build, then the bootstrapping process will start. It will actually create that packages.config file for me, but it will also create it to use the most recent version of Cake, which is 34.1. Now, Cake.recipe doesn't work with 34.1 for reasons, and that's part of why we're going through this process. So in order to get this to work, I'm going to need to pin it to an earlier version of Cake that is known to be the one that works with Cake.recipe. So if I run that build again, the build should get further, right? So let's just make sure that that part is working as I sort of expect it to. Let's just wait for that to complete. For the first time round, it's going to take a while because it's downloading a bunch of files, restoring NuGet packages, all that sort of thing. So let's let that complete. It's getting there. Unit tests are executing. I mean, like I say, at this point, I've not changed any code in here, so I was just going to say it should still just work, but there's obviously something not quite right in there. So we will come back to that in a little bit, or will we? What's the actual test? The test here is, what's it trying to assert? Error message, file not found, could not load cake.core. Why is... Oh, look at that. Oh, so the pull request that went in. Okay, so Jericho, the creator of the Cake.addin discoverer, who raised the original PR, I believe he has updated the Cake references in the main project, but not in the unit test project. So we will need to fix that. So we can come back to that. Because what I wanted to do now was to pin to this version of here, but I also need to include the packages.config file, which is currently excluded. Now it's excluded because of a rule that's in the git ignore file, which is saying I suspect that. So that's not really the recommended way of doing it. What we need to say is we're excluding everything but the packages.config file, which will then allow me to hopefully check it in. But why But why? Packages.config. Why is it not letting me add that file? Let me check something here a second. Go github.com. I spelled that completely wrong by the look of it. github.com, and I'm going to search for git ignore. So on GitHub there is a project that is essentially a list of recommended Visual Studio git ignore files for whatever project they're working on. One of those is a Visual Studio, and then it is already got an entry for the recommended setup for Cake, which is what this entry is doing. Will that give me 3 files? There we go. Okay, so it must have been because we weren't including everything, all files, we were including the entire folder, and then we want to pick out specific ones. So here I'm going to do what I said I was going to be doing, which was pinning to this. So I'm going to grab that, and I'm going to grab that, and I'm going to say that this was issue 15 again. So we've pinned to cake.recipe, we've pinned to that, and then we've updated that. Okay, so the issue I think with the build is if we go in here, this is still using, or this is using a different version compared to the main project. So I'm going to fix that, and I'm going to make it a little bit more. That's not actually right. That's not actually alphabetical, is it? Let's put that in, and then I'm going to put this in. Common Core and testing. And now if I run the build, I'll let that run, and then I'm going to grab the issue number of the other one, which was this one, so it's 13. So this commit that I'm away to do should be associated with that commit, with that issue. So let's see if it's still not working. Okay, but it's failing for something else now. Okay, so that's fine. That I understand. So between version 26 and 33 of Cake, there were some changes to some objects. So in here, and I suspect it's in the fakes, then there is a failure in here because now why? I'm getting a serious case of deja vu of having already done this, and I think I have already done this, but I did it on another project, I think. But I mean, the reason it's failing is because this process runner, we hit F12 here, then this process runner wants a file system, an environment, a log, a tools locator, and a configuration object. And as of right now, it doesn't have those things. So we need to give it those things. Now, the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to pull these 3 variables up above the process runner, because those are the majority of the things that I need. So if I go back into my, that one needs this one, otherwise it doesn't work. So this one wants a file system, I think was the first one. So this was a breaking change in the Cake ecosystem, but it wanted a log. I mean, we don't often change the parameter order, but it was deemed as necessary. And then we need the config object. So that one needs there, and also the Cake context changed, I believe, for a similar thing, that it needed a data service. And I don't think I've got one of those yet. So what I need to do is I need to go and fire up a new data service. So I need a new data service, which is equal to a new Cake data service. Now, I think, you know what, I'm actually going to look at the one I did last night, because it did the exact same thing. Cake-Contrib, cake.browser stack. Normally I don't do it this way, and this is kind of why I'm flummoxing a little bit. Normally I use the built-in fixtures within the Cake testing assembly, which doesn't require fake context to be created, because we'll already new one up for you. But if we look in here at its tests, the ones I was playing with last night, then it uses the same concept of fakes, and one of these is a fake context, and I was playing with this last night, and so that's what it did. So is it not? So it doesn't have one of those. Okay, so let's go and see what it's doing then. So it's arguments, context, and log. Arguments, context, and log. So it doesn't have a fake data service. So I'm gonna steal this one, and I'm going to create a new fake in here called fake data service.cs, and then I'm going to paste this in here. Now obviously that needs to change to SemVer. I'm going to do all of those things, and then if I go back to where that was being used, which was in the context, then I can borrow that here, and I can go back to my context and I can say, let's get rid of that. That should flow through. Why do we not already have that? SemVer fake. Oh, I see the problem. Look at that. That shouldn't say Xamarin. That should say SemVer, which means I don't need that anymore. So I'm going to do a quick sanity check to make sure that there are not any other Xamarin references, and there are. So that's wrong. That should be SemVer, because we're in the SemVer project. I suspect that that is a copy-paste error from Redith, or Redth, when he created this, because he must have borrowed a lot of it from his other projects, which is perfectly valid to do, obviously. We just need to fix it. So now that we have that data service object, I can come over here and say my data service, and then I also need the config object that's kicking around as well. So that should make my context work. And then, in theory, if I go back and run this build again, we should be at a point where we are fixed. So these are the kind of problems that we start to introduce, or as a result of having multiple breaking changes between some of the older versions of Cake that these add-ins are using. Sometimes in order to get them updated, there's a little bit more work than just updating the package reference. Could not be found in mine. Which file is that in? That's in SemVer tests. What did I break there? SemVer tests is here. Fake context. Oh, because that needs the reference. So I think I deleted it. Let's put that back in. And then fake context could not be found. So I think that's it. I think. Let's have a look. So I hope the goal of today's stream is really to at least get this one out the door and get a new version pushed out. And if we can get that done, that's one more thing off my list. And then the number is slowly creeping down. So that would take me under 20 if I can get this one pushed out. Slowly work my way through this list. So we were hitting issues here with getting an update from 26.1 up to 33, and all the other ones are below that. So I expect that there might be some other issues with these projects as we get them pulled up. Okay, so that's running now. .NET Core Pack is running, and then in my output, I'm expecting that there will be an upkeg ready for publishing, which there is. Good. Okay. Now, the only thing I'm seeing there is that is asserting the wrong version number. I would have expected that to not say that. I would have expected that to say something else, because if we have a look at a tag, there are no tags. Okay, so this is maybe something we need to fix as well. Let's come back to that. So right now we're going to say GH13, wasn't it? Is that what I said it was? The issue was 13, yes. So GH13, fix unit tests after updating project to 0.30. And I'm going to make it just fix tests after upgrading to 32.0. We'll go ahead and commit that. Okay, so I can close that off. Now, let's have a look and see. So NuGet.org, if we search for Cake.SemVer, SemVer, no, close, SemVer, then the latest released version is 3. So for some reason, there aren't any tags in the repository that reflect that, and that's typically how I do it. So there are 3 releases here, which was version. Have I not fetched git status, git fetch upstream? Oh, it doesn't. It hasn't pulled the tags down. So that makes more sense now. So now if I do a git tag, we've got a 3.0, and then if we run the build again, we should, if I can spell build, we should get a different asserted version number now, because this repository, like others, uses git version, and git version asserts the version number based on the history of the repository, including git tags. So now we should be building 3.10, I would have thought. But let's see if we can find where that is in the output. So where is that? 3.01. Oh no, because this is just on the master branch. It doesn't have a develop branch. That's why it's building the next one. So the one I'm interested in, I want to build 4.0 as the next one. There's a couple of ways I can do that. I'll probably just force the issue once I actually come around to generating it. But that's fine. So we've done that one. So looking back at where we're at, so we've pinned to a version of Cake.recipe. The next thing I normally check is a configuration parameter in here that says should run git version. Now the reason I do that is because the way Cake.recipe works is it doesn't run git version on anything other than Windows by default. And because I do some of my development on my Mac, the version number doesn't get asserted correctly. So basically by running should run git version all the time, then it'll work the same everywhere. So I'm just going to add a note here that is always run git version. So that's what that one's for. And then the NuGet metadata is the next one. So this is really why I'm doing some of these as well, is because there are some new recommendations from some new recommendations from the NuGet team in terms of what NuGet metadata should be included in any NuGet package that gets pushed. And one of those is to no longer use a license URL, which is the way that it's normally done, and instead use a license expression. And the other one is a repository URL, to include a repository URL so that there's a potential distinction between where the project homepage is and also where the source code is, because they're not always the same thing. So there's another couple of things that I'm noticing here just as we're going through it. So the first one is that I'm going to say that an additional owner of this NuGet package is the Cake-Contrib owner on NuGet, because Jonathan decided to do that, but he's still the main author, so I'm going to leave that part. And then as a sanity check, I'm going to look to see if red's still being used, because that's no longer the case. because this repository now lives on Cake-Contrib. So I want this here to say Cake-Contrib, and the AppVer account name is going to be Cake-Contrib, because that's where we're now running the build for this project. And then Redith there makes sense, Redith there makes sense, but Redith here doesn't make sense, because again, that should be Cake-Contrib, because the repository moved. Okay, so I'm going to have a quick look at the license file in this repository, which is, I'm going to say, oh, this one's MIT. Interesting. Normally, Jonathan's ones are under Apache. So in order to add in a license expression, I need to know what license we are doing it under. So what I'm going to do now then is I am going to go over to one that I've used before. So if I look at Cake-Contrib cake.warp, which is one of Kim's projects, if I can spell contrib properly, contrib. If I look at one of Kim's project files, then we'll be able to pull out what we need. So the first one is the license expression, which is this one. So their projects are under the same license. So I can just drop this in, which will give me a license expression, and the other one is the repository URL and the repository type. So if I pull that out and put this in here, then obviously the change that I'm going to make here is that it's not warp, it is SemVer. Okay, and then I'm going to want to make that line up. Okay, so that's including the recommended NuGet package data as of today. Now there are other recommendations coming down the line in terms of embedding the package icon rather than linking to a static object. That's for a different day. The one that we're looking at now is just this. So again, this is GH15, and we're going to say update NuGet metadata. And if I say that, then we go back to the one that I've done before that has a list of commits. So then we're kind of into some kind of other things. So for as of right now, for example, this is the appver.yaml file. We've made some additional recommendations. So the kind of the new recommended appver.yaml file is this. So it's going to include a few more things in it. So I'm going to say, I'm going to delete this one, and I'm going to use that new one, and I'm going to say GH15 add standard appver config file. The other one in here, if I use my assets extension in Visual Studio Code, I can say I want to have some let me just write SemVer, Cake.SemVer. This will add me in kind of the what's becoming the standard GitHub template file. So this will give me pull request templates, issue templates, as well as a code of conduct. So the change that I had to make there was the name of the file. When I originally set up this add assets extension, I got the name of that file wrong, and I had to remember at the minute to change that. So that's a little bit annoying, but I need to fix that at some point. Add GitHub template files. Boom, did that. And then there's another one under CI/CD, which is for an editor config file. So that just brings some consistency in terms of how editors respect spaces, line endings, that sort of thing. So I'm going to say add editor config file. And then the last one is really a Git attributes file that this repository doesn't currently have. So we'll add in kind of the default one that I use. It has very little rules in it, but it's somewhere to start. So we're going to say add Git attributes file. And that, I think, is kind of where we are. So assuming that all of this still builds,
and hopefully there's no reason that it shouldn't, although I'm just noticing a red text there. I don't think I noticed that last time. Let's run the build again and see what happens. So the build works, and I'm curious as to what this reference to unidentified entity MP. We might have to fix that as well. There's lots of MPs. It's here. Well, I think that's meant to be an ampersand. I think. Package.SemVer ampersand version 2.04. I think what he was gunning for there was something similar to what we have in here. So if we go to Cake.recipe and we go to content and we look at addins, then I think what he was gunning for was an ampersand. But that is missing an A, I think. So there we go. So our tests all work, they completed. Good. Okay. So I'm going to do that final change, which was really a fix documentation. We'll go ahead and save that. Hello, Gareth in the chat room. How are you today? I think I'm going to push this up, and I'm going to see if the app.ver build passes. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to open up app.ver and check the build result. So we should, hopefully, if we search for SemVer, it's there. So let's see if that builds. And if it does, then because I haven't changed really any code in the project, I'm happy to then push it out. So what we need to do is we need to generate some release notes of what we've included in this release, and we need to get that pushed out. So the issues that we were working towards was this one. So general repository and project update, we've got a bunch of commits against that. That's associated with the 4.0 milestone. So I'm going to go ahead and close this one out because we've done all of that work. And then the remaining issues were could not load SemVer DLL. Could you confirm what version of Cake you're using? Has the same issue. I end up dropping down to there. So this issue was because this issue happened because the add-in was ahead of the version of Cake at the time. So Reddit released a version of Cake.SemVer which only supported NetStandard 2, and we can see that in his project file, I think, which is here. So yeah, it only supported NetStandard 2, and at the time, this version of Cake didn't support NetStandard 2. I'm fairly sure, if anything, it was NetStandard 1.6, so it wouldn't result in that. So I might add some comments to that effect in here. So that build succeeded, but that build will be building 3.0.1, which is not what we want. We want to build 4.0. Now, the way that I can do that is there's two ways I could do that. I could come into here and I could generate or create a git version.yaml file, and in there I could specify that my next version is 4.0.0. I'm going to cheat a little bit though. I'm not going to do that. And the way I'm going to cheat is I'm just going to tag this locally. So I'm going to add a tag that is 4.0.0, but I'm only going to add that locally. Now, if I run my task, which is to generate my release notes, which is going to be target equals release notes,
then because I created that tag, it will use that as the latest base version number to assert things from. It will then pass that to Git Release Manager. Git Release Manager will find the associated milestone in the repository. It'll find all the issues, and it'll generate me a release notes with 4.0.0, which is what this is. And having done this task, oh, that's my bad. That's failing because I didn't label one of the issues. So if I go up to, not that one, if I go up to this one, and I look at my milestone and find out what issues are in there. There are 4 of them. One of them isn't labeled correctly. So they are breaking change, improvement, and documentation. So why is that not? Oh, because my YAML file. Okay. Okay, back up a step. So git tag -d 4.0.0. If I go into here, then I don't have a YAML file. That's why. So I'm going to need to do CI/CD, and I'm going to pull down a git version.yaml file. That git version.yaml file will include the main or the default issues that I want it to associate it with. So now I'm going to say gh-15 add grm config file. If I do that, and I'm going to push that up as well, so git push upstream again. And I'll also push this to my fork, because that's keeping them in sync. And now if I do git tag again at 4.0.0, and I run my build again for the release notes, now it should work. So let's see. This should work. So like I say, I'm cheating a little bit by creating the tag locally to first run this specific task, which then worked. So I remember to do it. I'm going to delete that local tag again. That process will have come up here and created me a new draft release with those things in it, one of which is a breaking change. But the other ones were documentations and improvements. So once this build finishes, which there's no reason that it shouldn't, because it was just a modification to the configuration file, I can go ahead and release this. So let's just wait for that to finish. And let's run a test. And if the test is complete, there's no reason that the rest shouldn't. And one thing I wanted to check while we're here is that it is main repository is true. Yes. But anyone that uses Git Cake-Contrib recipe, if they run into issues with some of the publishing steps not happening, normally it's down to this is main repository not being set to true. And the reason we have that is we're trying to make sure that the publishing only happens on the kind of the official repository, and the official repository is what is controlled in that recipe.cake file. So that's why I modified that to be Cake-Contrib rather than Red's personal repository, personal org on GitHub. So that's there. So that means I can come over here and edit this release and say publish. That will trigger another build on app.ver, and then that one will be tagged, and then that will do a publishing cycle. That will send out the NuGet package to NuGet.org. It will send out a tweet to Twitter saying that there's a new version. It'll send out a message to Gitter and various other things. So with that done, I should be able to do a git fetch upstream, which will pull down that tag locally into here, and then that's that part completed. So assuming that this goes through, and there's no reason it shouldn't, what we should end up with is a new version pushed to here. Now what we won't see is, we won't see that straight away because we would need to be signed in. But I might do a little sanity check off stream just to make sure that that works. So I'm just opening up a browser off stream here. So I'll need to sign in with a different account in order to see that. So let me click on a button, click on here. I'm going to sign in there with the password. And then I need an authentication code. And this is really why I didn't do it on stream, because I don't want to type in my authentication code on a live stream. Let's add that in. And then if I type in Cake.SemVer over here, and we look at how the build's going, then we're getting very close to having a new release, which we do. So I can see it here. It's not been published. It's currently validating it, but I can see it in there and it has been published. And it's just sent out a tweet to Twitter saying that a new thing has been released. It's ready to go. So the last thing I wanted to do here was to go to this issue. And I'm going to add a message in here to say, I suspect that the issue you were having here is that the version of Cake you were running didn't support net standard 2.0, which this add-in is only set up to work for. Updating to a newer version of Cake should fix this. So I'm going to close that out because I suspect that's what the issue was. So then that's Cake.SemVer updated. And if we go back to our spreadsheet, the next time Cake.addin discoverer runs, this one will be out the list because it's been updated. I'm going to skip over Cake.Apprenda because I'm fairly sure that Cake.Apprenda is no longer being updated because Apprenda itself, the thing that it was utilizing, it isn't being actively developed. So I'm not worried about that one so much. Cake.CSV helpers is one that currently lives under the Radio Systems Organisation on GitHub. Now, Jamie Phillips, one of the Cake community members, I believe is in discussions with them to get those pulled over into Cake-Contrib Organisation. So before doing too much more work here, I'm going to wait and see if that happens. Because as you see, Jamie Phillips is there. He is in communications with them to try and get that pulled over, and then we can do some updates directly. So the next one after that is Cake.Entity Framework. Now, there was an open pull request into here to update to the latest version of Cake, which I think has now been pulled in, which was this one. Now, there were some issues with this. I know that Lewis pulled those in, but I think I left a note here to say that we need to fix this, and I'll maybe just start doing that because I know that Lewis's time is limited, and I've spoken to him about updating it before, so I'm going to help out here a little bit. and get this updated. So I'm going to go to my fork, which is this one. So at the very least, I can start the process of doing that. So if I do this, and I go up a level, and I say git clone my fork, and then I'll grab the URL for the upstream, which is here. So cd into Cake.entity framework, git remote add upstream there. I'm going to say git fetch upstream, and I'm going to rebase my local develop branch on that one there. I'm going to push that to my origin because it's out of date, and I'll do the same for the master branch because it's likely out of date as well. So git. Oh, I'm going to use the new command. Oh, do I have that on here? I do. So I can do git switch to the master branch. Check out master. Oh, interesting. Look. So git checkout gives me the command that I need, but git switch doesn't. Interesting. Origin master git rebase upstream master git push origin. Okay, so that's everything back in sync. Now if I do a git, so switch should work this time, right? Switch to develop. It did. Interesting. Okay. So, and the other thing I wanted to check though, there was an open pull request for doing stuff. So what was this doing? This was one that was raised by Jericho with his add-in discoverer. So it was really only updating the icon URL. So we can pull this in at some point, but let's have a look and see what let's have a look and see if we can see what it was. Yeah, so this is the one that's open. So what my thought process there was, while I was trying to work through that, if we go to Cake.entity framework. See, someone else was telling me about this. I've searched for the explicit name Cake.entity framework, but because there's other things in there that have got entity framework in them, the sorting algorithm that's being used, even though the explicit name is Cake.entity framework, that's what I searched for, it's further down. So that's kind of broken. But anyway, so the currently released version of Cake.entity framework is 2.10. Because that's before SemVer, or SemVer 1.0, the next version that we're going to ship then is, let's close off some of these. So the next milestone that we'll create will be 0.30. It'll still be a breaking change, but we will we'll start 0.30, and then we will add this one to that. So that's going to be there, and then this is actually going to be a breaking change. So I'm going to label this as a breaking change. And then I'm going to add another one, which is similar to what we did before. So general project and repository update. So this is going to be labeled as an improvement, and that's going to be added to this milestone, and I'm going to assign that to myself. So let's go ahead and, unless there's any compelling reason not to, I'm just going to merge it. The CI build didn't pass, but that's for other reasons. So the change itself is valid here. So I'm going to say that that looks good to me. And we'll fix the build as a result of getting things merged then. So let's go ahead and merge this, and I can do that because I have admin rights in this repository. So let's go ahead and do that. That's going to say it's resolved that issue that it was linked to, which is labeled as a breaking change. And this was actually going to be
let's make it so that this actually reflects what we actually are going to be doing, which is 033. And we should probably fix up this one as well. Okay. And the mention of the icon URL wasn't actually there. So let's edit, and we will say update icon URL to use recommended URL, because that's what the PR that we just merged then. So this one isn't necessarily complete just yet, so I'm going to reopen this issue because we've done that one, but some of these other things haven't been done or not been done completely. So if we do git fetch, do a git fetch upstream again to pull in that PR that we just merged then. So I'm going to fetch the upstream, and I'm going to do a git rebase. I've forgotten how to type. Upstream develop. And then we'll do that over here. So git push origin. So I know, because I reviewed the PR last night, that the person that pulled it in updated a bunch of stuff to use 32.1. And they did that because they believe that there was some sort of transitive dependency between the version of Cake that's being used to do the build and the version of Cake that's being compiled in the add-in. And there's not. You can have different versions for different things. So I'm going to say that we want that to be 33. This is going to be 33 also. Now there's no reason that we shouldn't update that to be the same. So we will update that. Now this is going to be a bigger job to update this add-in because it's still using older project system. Now that's not a problem. We'll fix that, but it's not going to be as quick as some of the other updates that we've done. So this is 33. This is fine. Packages.config should be. Oh, hold on. Let's do that. And then, that brings up an interesting. So this one we're going to leave as is because it's the pinned version of Cake. I saw Fody in there, didn't I? I saw Fody. That one's going to be interesting because in switching to .NET Standard, which is what I'm going to want to do, Cake.Fody doesn't work the way. Oh, look at that! I've just been raided by Rojuav, and they were instructed to say the ROS bots have descended. So thank you very much for the raid there. I appreciate it. Now, not Cake.Fody. Fody.Costura doesn't work properly on .NET Standard, or it does work, but it's not intended to work the way that it works. Rosh Yuav saying, hello, I'm another member of the Cake Live Coders team. Never met you before, but came along to say hi. Well, you're more than welcome. Thank you very much. I'm just doing my lunchtime stream. So I do a lunchtime stream on a Friday, which is whatever I'm currently working on. I just got that hour to do some stuff. And are you aware that your stream is uncategorized? No, I'm not. I think I looked at that before, but there wasn't an obvious place to put it. So I'm welcome to take some advice on where that should be. If you wanted to drop me a note, I would appreciate it. I'm Gep13 pretty much everywhere. So Twitter, GitHub. Feel free to drop me a note. Science and tech, probably. Okay, I will do that.
I think I looked at that before. Interesting. I will make sure to get that added. The thing that I was thinking about here was we were looking at the newest OBS 24, not quite release, as it some cool new features. Interesting. Oh, which version am I on just now? I'll be on. Yeah, I'm on 23 at the minute. So I'll need to look at that too then. So Stephen is saying that there's a few tags that should be appropriate as well. Again, throw them in the chat. I'm happy to take recommendations on that. I'll be honest and say that I probably have been not as diligent with the stream setup in that regard as I probably should be. As you'll probably have noticed when you guys raided, I didn't have any of the fancy things that jump out and say that I was getting raided and all that sort of things. I've not been through and set that up, mainly because I haven't had time and I don't really know what I'm doing. So if anybody wanted to help out and get me that help me get that set up, I would appreciate it. So it's just not something I've done, I'll be honest. So suggested tags are AMA, design, family friendly, programming, software development. That makes total sense to me. So I will get those added as well. Thank you very much. The point I was just making, because like I say, this is my lunchtime stream. My lunchtime finishes in 3 minutes. So the thing that I was just saying was that this add-in makes use of Fody and specifically the Costura add-in for Fody. So if anyone don't knows, Fody is an IL weaver, so it does magic basically. It weaves into the generated IL from your .NET project some additional code so that you don't have to do it in your main project. One of the weavers here is specifically to embed the reference DLLs as resources within the assembly so that you don't have to take a NuGet dependency on the things that you're taking a dependency on. So I'm going to assume in this case that it's the entity framework assembly that's being IL merged into the generated assembly. Now, when we switch this project to use .NET Standard, that's not going to work because assemblies that are IL weaved as a resource don't get extracted and included properly. You need to use IL repack rather than IL merge or Fody.Costura. So we figured out how to do that on another Cake add-in. So we'll need to add in an IL repack command into the csproj file to make that magic happen. And if we get all of that done, then it should just work. Right? So that's going to be a job for a different day because at this point, I'm all out of time. So to recap where all of this came from, if anybody else is interested, I have this, or rather, I don't have this, but one of our Cake community members creates this Excel spreadsheet providing an audit of Cake.addins and what versions they're at, whether they've got the recommended NuGet metadata, all that sort of stuff. So I'm currently working my way through this list. There are 281 add-ins, and my filtered list at the minute is to try and get these 20 to be using the recommended version of Cake, which is 0.33. So I'm currently at this one because these other ones, the ones above, are in flight. So I've still got another few. So 13 to go. So the content of my stream for the next short while will probably be more along the lines of doing this. So I stream every Monday evening at 8 o'clock or 8 p.m. in the UK and Friday lunchtime. So between 12 and 1 on a Friday. So if you're interested, that's where I'm going to be. Feel free to join in. And thanks to Roj Uav for those suggestions. I will get those tags added into Twitch and get myself categorized so I appear in the right places. So thank you very much for joining and thanks for the raid. I do appreciate it. But that's it. That's all I have. So I'm going to sign off. Thank you very much. And I will speak to you again soon, hopefully. You're very welcome. I love doing it. So take care.